This is a visual of the relationships we talk about. I like to visualize it as a pyramid where the most basic skills are at the bottom and the most complex are at the top. Because as we know, without foundational layers, you won't be able to move to the next layer. This is very indicative of the way that children's overall literacy develops and the skills that they need to be literate. So the base is phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. As we said, phonemic awareness falls under the umbrella of phonological awareness because identifying sounds is a prerequisite to manipulating sounds. The second level is phonics. Phonics combine the knowledge of sounds, phonemes, and graphemes using the alphabetic principle. The third level is decoding and spelling. Decoding and spelling both rely on phonics and are directly related as they are opposites. One is taking written text to sounds and the other is taking sounds to written text. Word recognition and vocabulary is the fourth level. Word recognition and vocabulary share a reciprocal relationship in development and both contribute to overall reading fluency. And the final level, which is our overall goal, is comprehension. Comprehension, the ability to understand text, is the ultimate goal of reading and is supported by the other foundations of reading. Criteria 5 and 6, define and explain dyslexia. In this section, we're going to define what dyslexia is, review legislation related to dyslexia and literacy intervention, and discuss the 4 reading profiles according to the simple view of reading. So, what is dyslexia? According to the International Dyslexia Association, the definition that they created in 2002 is that dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin. It is characterized by difficulties with accurate and or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding abilities. These difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language that is often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and the provision of effective classroom instruction. Secondary consequences may include problems in reading comprehension and reduced reading experience that can impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge. So this definition touches on a multitude of deficits that we see in a lot of students with dyslexia, which I'll go into detail more on the next slide, but I do want to address what a specific learning disability is. With dyslexia being a specific learning disability, that means that it is a disorder in one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in understanding or in using language, spoken or written, which disorder may manifest itself in the imperfect ability to listen, think, speak, read, write, spell, or do mathematical calculations. And this definition comes from the Individuals with Disability Education Act, the most recent version, which is from 2004. So I felt the need to add this slide to display why there truly is a need for intervention. So side by side, we have the diagram that I brought up earlier of reciprocal relationships in reading development. And I also brought in the definition of dyslexia provided by the IDA. When we cross-reference these, we see an overlap in a lot of these skills. So I went ahead and put in bold the difficulty with accurate and or fluent word recognition, which affects tier 4 of the reciprocal relationships. It also indicates poor spelling and decoding abilities, which affects tier 3. These difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language, which impacts tier 1. Secondary consequences may include problems in reading comprehension, tier 5, and reduced reading experience that impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge, which impacts tier 4. So we talked about the importance of each one of these levels of literacy development: phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, phonics, decoding and spelling, word recognition, and vocabulary and comprehension. So in the definition of dyslexia alone, we can discern that there are weaknesses in 4 out of 5 of these levels of literacy. So when we look at this, it's clear to see why there is a need for intervention, specifically for students with dyslexia. Based on the deficits that we've observed, it's very clear that there's a need for intervention. And this need has been observed by state legislation and federal legislation, mainly in the area of the states. So, talking about state legislation, we're going to talk about Georgia literacy legislation, starting with the Georgia Council on Literacy, which is Senate Bill 211. In it, the governor, lieutenant governor, and Speaker of the House appointed a 30-member council whose primary focus is to assist and ensure local systems develop and implement 5-year literacy plans, science of reading instruction, and individual literacy plans for students in kindergarten through grade 5. The council includes 7 individuals with knowledge, skills, and experience in literacy or dyslexia education, which comes directly from the bill itself. Next is the Georgia Early Literacy Act, House Bill 538. House Bill 538 mandates the use of state board-approved screeners to assess kindergarten through 3rd grade students' literacy skills, guide instruction, identify struggling readers, and monitor progress through 3 screenings per year. Schools must implement tiered interventions for students with significant reading gaps. The Georgia Department of Education must provide science of reading instruction and structured literacy training for all K-3 teachers. Local school boards must adopt high-quality instructional materials for these grades. Lastly is the Dyslexia Identification and Supports, also known as Senate Bill 48. Senate Bill 48 requires students in grades kindergarten through 3rd to be screened for dyslexia, the development of a dyslexia informational handbook, professional development opportunities for teachers, and the creation of a dyslexia endorsement for teachers, which is what this project is. Moving on to federal legislation, there isn't really any outright federal legislation. Something that's been identified previously, I felt the need to add this, is for educational purposes, a student may be identified as having a specific learning disability, likely to be dyslexia, without a formal dyslexia diagnosis. This is a major development because I know a lot of teachers will shy away from using the word dyslexia in an IEP if a child is not formally diagnosed. So in this letter written to a colleague, in 2015, Uden outright states that teachers may use in IEPs the word dyslexia even without a formal diagnosis, which just gives other teachers a better idea of what they're working with when they get a student so that proper accommodations, proper instructional methods can be used. Another thing that I found interesting with federal legislation was the proposal of the 21st Century Dyslexia Act. So, like I said, it was a proposal, but it was very interesting to see how the federal level considered dyslexia. So, the 21st Century Dyslexia Act was introduced to the Senate on December 1st, 21. If passed, the bill would have removed dyslexia from the definition of a specific learning disability and established a standalone definition for dyslexia within the IDEA. So the definition that they would have provided for the IDEA was an unexpected difficulty in reading for an individual who has the intelligence to be a much better reader, most commonly caused by a difficulty in the phonological processing. The appreciation of individual sounds of spoken language, which affects the ability of an individual to speak, read, and spell. This definition is very interesting because it's almost a combination of the definitions of specific learning disability provided by the IDEA and the definition of dyslexia provided by the IDEA.